Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations around money. I'm your host, Lauren, a 4-time Olympian and certified financial planner. On this show, my guests share their money stories. Everyone has a unique story and experiences both wins and losses when it comes to money. My intent is to give listeners something they can relate to, something that builds their courage to be open and take control of their own money story. When I'm not creating a great show for my listeners, I'm running my company, Worth Winning, where I help individuals and families organize their finances. Check us out at worth-winning.com. All right, now on with the show. Okay, good people, this is our last guest episode of the year. You get to hear my lovely voice one more time this year, but this is our last guest and it is awesome. Today we have Eugenie George here to share her money memoir with us. Eugenie is a financial educator, podcaster, lover of yoga, comedy, and a soon-to-be author. Her book, Our Money Stories, is soon to be published, and it's only fitting that we finish out the year with someone who wrote a book about money stories as our final guest on a podcast where we talk and share our money stories. So Eugenie's path to becoming a financial educator didn't grow completely from the love of math and numbers that she had as a child, although that was a little bit of a part of it. It actually came from overworking herself while trying to build a business, then hitting rock bottom financially. This has led her down a path of self-discovery that opened her eyes to the societal issues surrounding finances and installed in her a passion to help others fix their financial situation by better understanding their money story. I think you're going to love listening to the ups and downs of Eugenie's story, as well as appreciate the openness that she has in sharing. Let's listen as she shares her money memoir. Eugenie, thanks so much for being on the show today. I can't wait to hear all about your money story.
Me too. I'd like to hear it myself. No, I'm playing. Oh, boy.
I think it is one of those things, though, where people don't really know their story. It's your life, so you don't really think of it as a story. And then you're like, wow, yeah, that happened to me. Oh, yeah, I forgot about this. Maybe you will be surprised by some of the things you say today.
Yeah.
So I just told everyone a little bit about what you're up to now. But every story has an introduction that tells us a little bit more. So why don't you start by telling us about where it all got started for you? So where are you from? Do you have siblings? What kind of household were you in? Let's just start from the beginning.
Yeah. My household is a very spiritual one. My family's from Louisiana. So I was born in Louisiana, but I grew up in California. So that's like a huge culture shock when you have family that is Southern Baptist. And when they come to California, which is like free flowing, everybody's in their own groove, super politically active in an interesting way. It was a huge conundrum for me. So I was like going to church some days, and my church was like a very like prosperity gospel. Like, God will bless you with money. If your palms are itching, that means you're blessed. Very prosperity gospel. So that was really my first introduction to money, which pay 10% of your tithes. And that always was a thing that stuck with me. That's like my first interaction. When I was a kid, I actually really did like math and numbers. I was 8 years old and I told my mom I needed to learn how to play golf because that's where all the business deals are being made. And I did not live in like an affluent neighborhood. I have no clue how I came up with this, but there was always some part of me that was kind of interested in money. And then fast forward to a couple of years, I got really interested in looking at like stocks. Again, another thing that my family nor anyone else talked to me about, but I was interested in it. Anytime there was collector items, Beanie Babies or whatever, I would read it and kind of just like laugh at them because I'd be like, why are you spending money on that? That's ridiculous. So that's like my first introduction into my money story. I was actually always interested in math and money, but I never pursued it. I never thought about it. There were always these glimpses. And so when I started looking at my money story as a kid, I remember reading Alexis von Tobel's book, like something like Financial Fearless or something like that. She was like, what was your first experience with money? And so I wrote down all of those pieces. Like,
Oh, wow.
so I was like, oh, snap. Like, it was like this whole like, oh my gosh, I should be dealing with money. This is crazy. So that was like my first experience. Of course, like as I got older and I went to college, there were some of those glimpses too. Like my parents did not have any money.
What kind of household discussions were being had about money, or what kind of examples were the people in your household as it pertains to, like, what did you see them as it pertains to money?
Pray about it. Comedian Hassan Minaj was like, anytime you asked anything about money, people would be like, pray about it. Or like anytime you felt like you were going crazy or something like that, or like you needed to talk to someone about your emotions, it's always like, pray about it.
Were they trying to pray it into existence or just pray for enough?
Probably both. I remember hearing speak it into existence. I can remember really clearly when I was younger. I don't know how this happened, but we ran out of money. And one of my family members was like, get out the car. And I was like, what? And I got out the car and there was a $100 bill on the floor. And they would be like, God is blessing us. And so I remember like, oh my God. I'd be like, God is so great. Oh my gosh, $100. What? So it was like a huge influence on me. But it also created a lot of fear too, because I didn't know any really that much about money, except like the biggest lesson was one, never go into a check cashing place. Like my family always said, never go into a check cashing place, which I mean, thank God that was not the case. And then two, it won't take care of you. You got to take care of yourself. So those are like my only two money things.
I like it. I like it. People don't realize, like you said, all the different parts of their story that they don't realize, like, yeah, like never go into, like, that's something that stands out to you. Whereas other people, that's something they saw all the time growing up, and that was a regular part of their life. And they had to be untaught that you're paying 300% interest when you end up in a check casting place or with a payday loan or, God forbid, whatever else kind of scams that are out there or things that prey upon people who already don't have a lot. So good money messages were instilled in you even when you didn't have a lot.
Yeah. Because my family was going to the place and they would look at me and say, don't go to this place. So it was like, oh, okay, I won't do that. I saw it and I just chose not to do that. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Did you have a first job? Like, what was the first way that you remember earning money?
I was 12 and I guess I should always just acknowledge that I'm supposed to be an entrepreneur, but I still am always like, no, I'm not. But when I was 12, my mom used to work at a modeling agency. And I used to ask my mom, I was like, I can make your flyers. Can I make your flyers? But you have to pay me. So I was like, Mom, I can make your flyers. Like, pay me $10 for the flyers. I'll make all of them, like 100, 200, how many? So then I would tell my cousin, this is like real bad, but I would be like, ask my cousin who was like my play cousin who was like 7. I was like, how about if you help me with this thing, you'll make like $3. So like I kept $7 in profit and I would convince like my play cousins to help me make that. So that's my first experience of me trying to do money.
That is literally entrepreneur from day one.
Yeah. That's like my first real experience of me making money. And then as I got older, I followed the status quo of going into school. For undergrad, I went to community college first. So I paid for community college by myself. And then I transferred into Berkeley. I grew up in California, so that's a good school as a whole, but I also was super strategic about that. I took Berkeley classes while I was at community college for like $10 because they had like this weird partnership thing.
Was there conversations in the household when it was time to get ready to go to college for like, we're not paying for you to go to Berkeley all 4 years, so you need to go to community college? Or were you kind of like figuring that path out on your own? What were the conversations that led up to you deciding to choose community college first and then Berkeley second?
Well, I am an only child. So a lot of this is like me sitting down reading by myself. I say that like Oprah raised me, but I also say that Barnes& Noble raised me because any question that I had, I would sit in Barnes& Noble. But I think the thing was I went to an affluent high school in California and I went illegally. So there's a lot of people right now that our parents are going to jail because they put their kids in a district that's not theirs. So that's what my mom did. And fortunately, we didn't get caught because towards the last year and a half, my mom moved there. So we downsized, we moved to this area. And I just learned a lot from that experience. Like that book, The Hate You Give, it was when I read half of that, I was like, well, this is my life. So I just put the book down. So I'd be like, oh no, yep, I remember that. Yep. Like you have to deal with two different worlds. I mean, I never want to make fun of people because they're my friends, but I was like, I remember going back to where I grew up and people are like, oh, she changed. And then when I would go to the school, they're like, Eugenie, I love the way you talk,? So it would be like this weird, I was so confused. I was just a confused high schooler, but I did know that whenever I saw people that were affluent, I was like, oh, the way they're treating people is differently. The way they're handling money is differently. The way some of them are sitting down and eating at the dinner table every night. Those were some things that I did take from going to that area. And that area right now, Walnut Creek, California, I think Steph Curry lives there now, or he did live there. And you can probably tell that that's a very different community. And yeah, it was very rough. But I did know for community college, I was like, just don't tell anyone that you're here. Just go and put your head down. And I spent every week at the College Career Center, so much that they just knew my name. I just was there every week trying to figure out how to not pay as much for my student loans.
I think you bring up a really good point about social diversity in addition to racial diversity and economic diversity or lack thereof. And though there are more resources available to people now, it comes with new set of complications. And we're hearing this story more and more frequently. Like you said, The Hate You Give, your own personal story. I've told very instances of my story that have similar things where you get access to these resources, but you're well aware of a whole different environment that exists. And so it makes you more diverse, more well-rounded, but it also creates a whole nother set of problems in you trying to figure out who you are and what your identity is and which one of these things is right. And is there a right or wrong per se? So much of that gets ingrained in our money story and how we are able to move forward or not able to move forward because of the different things that we're carrying with us. That is not just money, but also life.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I wrote a book called Our Money Story, so we can talk about that. Because I think that was the biggest thing is when I kept moving up, accolades and different things like that, I still was very upset because I would look at someone from either a different ethnicity or a different social class, and I would start saying, well, that person got there because of this, or this person got this because of this. And I started doing that comparison game. And that ended up happening when I started my business as an adult. I was super stressed out about starting a business. And then I ended up overworking myself to the bone and getting super sick. And then I had a friend who took her life. Oh, and I got evicted from my apartment. I was overworking, being like, I have to get this business up and going and not taking care of myself. And so after that, that's when I kind of fell into financial planning because I was like, I don't ever want to be like this ever again. I didn't have a safety net. I wasn't married. My family lived thousands of miles away from me. And I was like, oh, I have to really be strategic about what I want to do next. Because of course I was like a good employee working a 9 to 5, but I was like, I need to figure out how to build a business, how to make money from that. Cause that really shook my core. And I kept blaming other people and getting frustrated with their experience, even though I didn't really know their financial story.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really good point, though, kind of pause and park on for a second is this idea that your money story can cause all kinds of blips and obstacles in your life. So what happened from college to this time period that you're talking about that where the finances fell apart? What were you not doing? More of the details of what happened there.
After graduation, it was during the recession or right after the recession. So I was determined to have a job before I graduated. So I was doing everything that I could. I got into Teach for America. I taught in the Mississippi Delta. God bless the America. And then I worked for a solid 5 years where I was teaching or working at an ed tech space. And so I did that, and I was pretty good at what I thought was like saving. Like I always had money in my savings account. Sometimes I would even be helping my family members to pay for stuff. I was on it when it came to that. I ended up paying my student loans off. I was really serious about being financially capable. I actually dated a guy when I was in Teach for America. I really think he really helps me understand like money as a whole, because his dad was an economist. We were dating and I had to be like 23, and he was like, "Oh yeah, these are my dividends." And I was like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" Like, I had no clue. I was like, "What?" Yeah. And he's like, "I'm really concerned that you have student loans and like all this stuff." So I am very grateful for our relationship, because that was kind of like the thing that made the wheels turning. And so then I think I read, fast forward to 5 years ago, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad or something. And I was like, I need to start a business. And I'm going to start a business. And it's going to be off of like how you can get yourself out of a quarter life crisis. Like, I'm going to figure this out. So I paid for all these workshops, paid for all these classes, paid for everything. And the thing I forgot to pay was myself. So I was taking all this money out. I depleted all my savings. I didn't have anyone to say like, Eugenie, you probably should be budgeting like you normally do. Or people were just like, yeah, get it, achieve your dream. And so when I got that eviction notice, which was 3 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 years ago, it happened right after my friend who was an entrepreneur, super successful on the outside, she committed suicide. So I was like, what? All this stuff happened right around the same time.
Yikes. Yeah, that's a lot.
And so it was like that. And then it was like, I took a break from my partner, who now we're like super tight, but I was like, I'm not a good person to date. This is too much for me. And so I literally tried to figure out on my own. And I was sleeping on my friend's couch, two of my friends' couches, because I was still trying to do a business, but I also was still trying to like have a full-time job. When I got sick so many times, they fired me. So I got fired, evicted, and lost my friend. So all that happened in threes. That's when I was like, okay, depression has hit real hard. You don't even want to get up out of bed. You are literally at rock bottom. So I just typed in like Black women eviction, what to do after eviction or whatever. The first article I read was this guy talking about how he got evicted and how he like came out of it. And I still was like, that's a great story, but I'm not hearing this from like a Black woman's perspective. I'm really proud of him, and that does give me hope, but something's still missing. I typed in Black women, Philadelphia eviction. And then I found out like in Philadelphia, Black women get evicted faster than any other group in the city. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like I really need to understand who I am. And I really need to understand what are these patterns and why am I still being a part of the societal problem. And that was kind of like the first aha moment. Like, you need to do something with finances. You need to figure that piece out. And then from there, I started waiting tables. And, for someone who went to Berkeley and like,
super humbling, right?
oh my gosh. Yeah. Like, it was humbling. Yeah, it was crazy. At that time, I had just turned like 28, 29. I just said, you just got to keep figuring this out. Like, you got to keep figuring out the business. You got to keep figuring out what you're trying to do. I was like, okay, you want to do financial planning. And then I said, well, I want to at least have something to fall back on. So I went back into student loan debt and decided to get a master's or MBA, because I was like, you can always teach community college classes. You can always teach classes. And I used to be a teacher. So I was like, oh, I could do that. So I went back into classes. And then last year I started a podcast, which is called Money and Flow. So that was kind of like, okay, let me tell these stories about women of color and like what's the deal and how your money plays like a huge part of it. And then last October, I was like, you need to write a book, and you need to write a book, and you need to explain like big picture things. And for the past year, I've been teaching this way, or understanding your money story. while working as a financial wellness trainer. So the book's almost done. It's taken me forever. I said I was going to be done like 6 months ago, but now it feels like it's close to being done.
Everything happens right on time. Take it from somebody who just wrote a book. And I was like, oh, this should be something that'll take me like 3 months. And then it was like a year and a half later. And I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to finish this book. And now I don't even want to finish it. Like, please, Lord, don't make me. So enjoy the process because it will be worth it in the long term, especially when you're trying to communicate purpose and impact people's lives. So you touched on quite a few things. One thing that I really love that you talked about was like this idea of relationships. And by meeting kind of a boo thing and seeing that he was doing something with his finances, you kind of were like, oh, wait, hold on 1 second. There's some stuff I need to learn about because I want to be up to snuff in the relationship, et cetera. It's often like, you know, like who you surround yourself with is an important part of the process of creating a good money story. Then you talked about like this idea of like working yourself to the bone. And sometimes we get stuck in this rut of work, 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 work. The Rihanna song came out for a reason. This idea that we will be rewarded if we just show people how hard we're working and all the return on the investment comes from all the hard work you put in. Yes, it is important to put in work, but also you need to work with purpose. You need to be strategic about the work. And there is a point of working to no return. And I think you demonstrated that in talking about your friend. And I'm sure there were other things going on, but this idea that you get so entrepreneurial, you get so tied into what you have to accomplish and what people are going to think of your achievements that there's kind of like this black hole that you just can't pull yourself out of that says, oh my goodness. And then before you know, it's too late. So to be very strategic about the way that we work and that we're not just working for money. The great Patrice Washington always talk about chase purpose, not money. And I think when we think about what our purpose is first, and then we start working toward whatever it is that our goal, it makes it a lot easier to do those sprints of work, but then also to be able to back off and be able to replenish ourselves so that we're not working ourselves to the bone.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that you talked about, I mean, you covered so much, girl. This idea that we feel so alone and how you just started like Googling like eviction. And there's these things that resonate, but they don't resonate all the way. And so sometimes people need to see and know that there are other people and not just other people that have gone through it, but other people that look just like them and have that kind of awareness light bulb cut on that like, this is not just a I screwed up thing. This is systemic.
Yeah.
And that this is happening in society and that there are lots of barriers that are creating obstacles that are putting people in these circumstances, that they're not just like, you're a bad money person, so you got evicted. There's so much more to all the different things that people are coming up against obstacle-wise when they face these big financial troubles. So the importance of doing research to understand that you're not alone and to cut your awareness on, I think is a really, really important thing that you just touched on. So amen, hallelujah to all of that, to everything you said.
Good.
So let's talk a little bit now about how you are approaching your finances current day. You're still entrepreneurial, you just finished school, there's some student loan debt. How are you taking the approach to managing everything right now?
It's crazy. I did a podcast on my net worth explaining different things. So currently my net worth is negative 75,000, I think $386. I've like plugged that in on Twitter and everyone's like, okay, and join the party. So I was like, oh, okay, I don't feel less bad. So I, every Friday, do this thing called money brain dumps or money dates. And what I do is I will set up some time for at least 2 hours where I'm looking at all the aspects of my life. So right now, the most important things are health, wealth, relationships, and career. And so I will sit down and be like, okay, well, how am I spending my money here? Okay, how am I spending my money with my career? How am I spending money with my family? Like what's going on? And so I have like a whole detailed thing that I look at my money. I organize my money. I have nice file folders for my money. It's almost like I'm trying to make room for the next piece that's going to happen. Because when I look at my bank account right now, I'm like, what? This doesn't make any sense. Even when I look at it, it's crazy. I've always had a really good credit score, but now all this stuff has happened where like I'm writing the book and applying for jobs and school really messed up my credit report. So now I'm like, oh my gosh, this has never happened to me before. I'm going to write about this. I'm going to blog about it. I'm going to talk about it because it is very overwhelming for me. And just have to make sure like your net worth isn't your self worth. So I have to just keep telling myself that.
Let's get some snaps there for that.
So yeah, that's like the big thing. I mean, and the other thing that's really reassuring is I am writing a book and it is called Our Money Stories. And so basically what I do as a whole is I ask the question, what does it mean to be financially well? Well, the actual term financial wellness means that you feel financially stable. But how are you going to know this if you don't even know what it means to feel well? So I will break down the 8 wellness pillars and I'll say, like, what is the money story I'm telling myself with my spirituality? What's my money story that I'm telling myself in my environment? What's my money story that I'm telling myself with my nutrition? Everything. So I will ask those questions probably like quarterly because that's a lot. So I feel like I'm a lot more detailed, but I have to be right now. Because, like, yeah, I'm trying to become a CFP, but I also have to make sure that my business plan and everything is aligned because every time I've tried to live somebody else's dream, I have been fired. I talk too much. Like, I've gotten myself in trouble. I've gotten fired day 2 of working for a financial advisor. So it's like, I have to be really strategic and I have to I'm just being honest.
Day 2?
Yeah. Like I said something that did not agree with certain individuals. And so I got fired. So I was like, okay, first of all, not every person is going to be behind your mission. And then also you have to be okay with your mission. I'm saying stuff that's really traumatic. Like, I'm talking about how adverse childhood experience, your trauma, can affect your money story. I'm talking about race. I'm talking about these things that has never been talked about. So I have to be okay with the fact that it's going to be uncomfortable for myself as long as I'm being true to what I'm doing. So that's difficult.
No, I love that. And I think it is, the more transparent you are, the more uncomfortable it gets. But the more transparent we are, the more comfortable it gets for us in society. And that's the whole reason this podcast exists, is so that people can get comfortable with the uncomfortable. You just told us about all different kinds of financial expertise that you have, but you also said, hey, I got negative net worth and I'm working on my credit. I think the big overarching message is you don't have to get it all right to be all right. And that everybody is on a journey toward knowledge. So some of us have more knowledge than others. Like I said, I have the CFP, I'm getting ready to be an AFC, et cetera. But there are things I'm learning about money every day. It doesn't make us a financial guru and sitting up on some throne that makes you able to tell everybody else you're doing wrong and I'm doing right. It's like, I'm sharing the information I have with you, and please share any information you have with me. And let's just keep being the best us that we can be along this process. So I really, really appreciate the transparency with which you're taking the approach. And, like you said, even when it doesn't sit well with others, embracing the fact that hey, this is my story. This is real. This is the way that I speak. This is my truth. And if you're not okay with me being my best self, then we're probably not the best fit for each other anyway, sort of thing.
Yeah. That's hard too, because you're like, wow, you look at your bank account and you're like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I feel like now the more I write, and now that I'm going through this self-publishing process, I feel more confident as an individual. But not only that, I'm about to tell people stories about being African American, Native American, Asian American. And so now I feel like there's a whole tribe behind me. I just have to be honest about what's going on. And it is very uncomfortable for me. I'm terrified.
Get comfortable being uncomfortable.
That's it. That's all right. Thanks, y'all, for letting me listening to me. And
yeah, I love it. All right. So we have made it to what I like to call the final sprint, because I was a world-class sprinter once upon a time. So this is appropriately named. And what I'm going to do is rapid fire some questions at you and you say whatever you feel. First thing is, you got $20 in your pocket right now. What do you spend it on?
Coffee.
Coffee. A $20 coffee?
No, I would break it down into 6 days because my coffee shop is $2.25. So that's 6 days plus gas.
Gotcha. Okay. So a few days of coffee, but all of it's going toward coffee. I feel you. Also, another good point to bring up Yes, because I feel like a lot of people shame people who go to Starbucks every day. And here's a financial expert that is going to spend her $20 on coffee. It's okay. Be your best
Yeah,
self.
it would be coffee. Yeah, 100% coffee. It plain though. I don't do those lattes because that becomes $10.
Right. All right. Best advice you've ever received.
It sounds crazy, but Prince Charming isn't coming. There was a great book that was called that, Prince Charming Isn't Coming. And I even unconsciously, I watched Disney. So I was like, oh yeah, maybe he will come. So understanding like you have to save yourself is really important.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. What's your worst money habit?
Oh, I'm like an ENTJ and I'm like tiny. So I always sometimes say I have little Napoleon moments where I'm like, it must be done, like this morning. So anytime I'm like, the universe depends on this, like I'm in a Marvel video, like I will spend however much money when I'm in crisis. So I'll be like, you have to get this course. This is the most important course ever, e-course, blah, blah, blah. So well aware of that. And I'm also well aware when that happens. Like after I buy it, I'm like, oh yeah, it's because you were sad.
So emotional spending then.
Yeah. And it'll be like, I have to change. So, yeah.
All right. What would you say is your best money habit?
Writing stuff down, 100%.
Why?
When you write down stuff, you remember stuff. I just actually, before hopping on this call, I do like money brain dumps for this Facebook group that I'm in. And when I write down my 10-year goals, they get accomplished. Every goal that I've ever written out, I said I was going to go do Teach for America, and I did it.
Yes.
Like I said, I was going to like pay off my undergraduate student loans. I paid them soonest when I turned 30. Now I'm getting super specific. Like I just wrote 10-year, 5-year, 1-year goals. You write stuff down and it will happen. You just have to be aware of it. And actually, it's got to be achievable too.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Finish this sentence. That awkward financial moment when?
When you look at somebody else's paycheck stubs or like, I'll have a coaching session with someone and they're like, nobody else understands me. And I'm like, no, I went through exactly the same thing, but probably worse. Those are awkward moments for the both of us, but it does make everything better to know that you're not alone.
Yes. They're like, wait, I paid you to be the coach. Now you.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm like, no, no. Yeah, I see where you're at. Like, yeah.
Right.
So yeah, that's a fun one.
All right. Final question. Can you share with us one thing that you would like to improve about your finances in the upcoming year?
Oh, I really want dental insurance. That is correlated to my finances. People were like laughing at me the other day. I have like one jacked up tooth in the back and I am self-employed. So there's a whole like rigmarole, but with healthcare. So I was like, oh, you're getting dental insurance. So small, but I like having nice teeth. I'm sorry. Like, this is
What's the action item to help you reach that goal?
I mean, I wrote it down. So I said, give yourself a reminder by March.
Gotcha.
It's so weird. I'm looking at my goals right now. So
yes, because you write them down and you make them real. I like it.
I make them real. Yeah.
All right. We have finished the final sprint. You have made it to the podium. You are standing at the top. Let me give you your medal because that's what we do in the Olympics. This is your time to shine. So tell us all about how we can support you, where we can find you, anything you want to tell us about how this community can get behind you.
Yeah. My name is Eugenie George. I'm always on Twitter. So you can find me on Twitter. I have podcasts called Money and Flow, where we break down the historical money story. Very different from this great podcast. You can find Money and Flow everywhere. And then if you go on my website, moneyandflow.com or eugeniegeorge.com, it's the same thing. You can get the first chapter of our money stories, which is crafting your financial wellness plan under an ancestral lens. So that's it.
Yes. Thanks so much, Eugenie, for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Eugenie's Money Memoir. I always talk about how important it is to be transparent about your financial story. And I love that Eugenie was willing to do so, even as a financial professional. I think so often you believe that Just because you have financial expertise, you have to have it all together, or you have to appear you have it all together. I love that she talked about how she has a negative net worth, because I think this speaks to so many listeners and lets you know that you are not alone. Negative net worth is something that can be temporary. You have to take action to move forward toward your future and toward that positive net worth. You may not be financially perfect, but you are not alone. And your net worth is not at all tied to your self-worth. So let go of any guilt and shame you're struggling with because of your finances. Time to take action. Our word of the day is holistic. This word is often used when talking about health, but this is the approach that Eugenie takes with finances. She even shared how she sits down with herself weekly to look at the way her financial story is playing out in each area of her life. Your finances are more than just money. It's what allows you to achieve your dreams and to create a life worth living. And that looks different for everyone, but taking that holistic approach can help you see what it looks like for you. And if you have no idea where to start with creating a holistic plan for yourself, look for a holistic or comprehensive financial planner. That's someone who's going to look at all aspects of your financial life, your goals, your values, and then help you create a plan. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you found this episode worth listening to. If you have financial questions, suggestions for guests, or you would like to share your own money memoir, do not hesitate to reach out and contact us through our website, worth-listening.com. Happy holidays, everyone.